is now post Thanksgiving, and I think everyone's just overcoming that tryptophan effect. But I couldn't think of a better person to kick off post Thanksgiving than Josh Little. Josh Little is one of those Renaissance men that you never know what he's going to be doing. The first time I met him was about a decade ago, and he was kind enough to sit down with a complete stranger and talk about what his journey was in creating different businesses. He was the national sales training leader for Stryker, if I remember correctly. And at that time, he decided, I'm going to go do stuff on my own here, and has since that time done many wonderful things. So Josh, I am very grateful that you accepted the invitation, and welcome to the show.
Well, it's my honor. Thank you so much for having me, Maurice and Gary.
The honor is truly ours. But with that being said, I just want to jump into some of these things here. You are one of those individuals that every time I hear about you, you're doing something different. Right? Last time that we spoke in length, it was you were just launching something called Qzzr. And now you founded another one called Volley, and this is only in the last couple of years, right?
Right. Yeah. Just
yeah.
2.5 years ago.
And on top of that, the one thing I didn't know is that you have Josh's Pickles. Okay, first of all, I can't believe you never gave me a jar. But those look delicious. How did you get into that?
Oh, well, I'm a 5th generation pickler. My family didn't have money, but they had excellent pickle recipes. So that's what I inherited, a leather-bound book of pickle recipes. And when I moved to Utah, I just started making pickles. And when I had a surplus, I'd just give them to friends, and then they'd want more. And then they'd give those jars to friends, and then their friends wanted some. And I thought, wow, these people really like, I thought this was just something that my family liked, but people really like these. And so I've turned it into a little hipster hobby business, where we grow we only jar as much as we can grow on our 1.5 acres here in Utah. And that's the limit. And we sell 1 day a year, and we sell out usually within 2 hours. So
That's
it's
cool.
something that my kids can help with throughout the season, make some good money, and yeah, learn to work, learn to build a business, and learn the family trade, I guess.
That's so cool.
Gary, you need to start a pickle farm because you have some of that stuff too, man.
Well, I don't have a leather bound book of awesomeness to go by. So
well, and Josh, you're also was an opera, if I remember correctly, something to the effect that, well, you sing a lot. I know that, but I couldn't remember in what context it was, which also blows my mind because you're such a mellow kind of guy, and that touches a lot of people, man. But how did you get into that stuff, and how has it helped you in your endeavors as an entrepreneur and just in general making those connections with everyone?
Well, the choir director of my high school was just the greatest marketer ever, and she knew that if she went to the 5th grade classrooms and showed a slideshow of all the field trips the choir went on, she'd get a lot of people to join choir. And I was one of those. I literally joined because of the field trips, because I did not like school. I was not successful in school ever, unless I really, really was into the subject, which was rare. But yeah, I joined the choir for field trips, and then pretty soon I started enjoying singing, and then started to get sort of good at it, and other people recognized, and then started taking voice lessons, and that led to scholarships in college and singing through college, and singing now in my life. I guess you could say semi-professionally, because I've been paid, but not really. It's like not a real thing, but I just love to sing and perform.
Man.
Okay.
But not on podcasts.
Yeah, there you go. So hold on a second. We've been talking, we've been talking apps, we've been talking Striker, we've been talking pickles, all within the first like 10 minutes here. And I want to anchor us back to when you were a kid in school, because people like you tend to have an interesting journey of kind of pivots and changes. So let's roll back to you. Let's start in high school. Like, tell us about your journey, because I'm totally fascinated by by everything you've talked about so far. But I want to kind of see the continuity of how Josh Little became the Josh Little we're talking to today.
Yeah, well, there's probably a couple little swatches to share there. In high school, I was the typical show choir / dirt bike kid. You know the type.
Yeah, that always goes together. That always goes.
No, growing up in rural Michigan, my dad worked for the power company. My mom did odd jobs. There wasn't a word for what she did. She was an entrepreneur, but we didn't know to call her that. We didn't know, she didn't know to identify as that. That word wasn't used in my hometown. People in Jackson, Michigan don't start businesses. They don't build things, and they work at companies. And so the opportunities I saw in front of me growing up, where I could either work for the power company like my dad, I could work for the prison because there was a big prison in my hometown, or I could become a teacher. And that's what I really saw, other than working in restaurants, which is where I worked in restaurants. So those are the paths I saw in front of me. It's crazy. Like, I didn't even know that a job called sales rep existed until I was like in my mid-20s, until I heard a friend, and I'm like, really? A company pays you to, like, they give you a car and you can travel around and just like talk to people and take them to lunch and stuff? What? I want that job. So I really didn't see the full menu of career options growing up. And so my interests growing up were what was in front of me. It was music and singing. And it's kind of, in the water in Michigan. Like, if you grow up in Michigan and you're not well off, you're going to work on cars, you're going to have crappy cars, you're going to have to learn to fix them. Everyone works on cars there. And so that also became something I was interested in: cars and off-road trucks and building trucks and engines and suspensions and those sorts of things. I still do that today, but I'm able to afford much better cars now, so they need a lot less repair than the ones
I'm assuming.
Yeah, many years ago. But if you want to connect that story to college time, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a plan for college. Some of my friends were going after school. My parents didn't go to college. They weren't really pressuring me or interested in me going to college necessarily. So 2 weeks before college started, one of the choir directors at the community college called me and said, "Hey, I'll give you a full ride scholarship if you just sing in our choir." And I was like, okay. So I started going to college and taking some classes and doing poorly in them. One momentum kicked in. I met who's now my current wife, or not current wife, who's now my wife. I met my wife like the first day of college. And so it was meant to be. And then we continued on. But really wondering what would a person do in this world? Well, teaching. That's probably the highest and best use. So I got a degree in education. And went off and taught in public schools for a year, just because I got the degree and probably should. But I knew in my student teaching that it just wasn't going to be it. And I also knew my first job was, I was making $27K a year, and I had a kid already, and I just couldn't support a family on that. And so I knew I needed to do something else, but I didn't know what someone with my skill set could do for the world. And that's where, I learned about sales and selling. This could be a thing. And I found out pretty quickly that I was good at it. And all the things that made me good as a teacher, if you can motivate 11th graders not to burn down the school, you can probably motivate someone to buy a thing. And all of the ability to like tell a story and educate someone on their options and be patient and work with them through a process. And that education and sales are really the same skill set, just aimed at different goals. And so, yeah, did well in sales, like you said, at 3 Fortune 500 companies, and then left to do my own thing. And now I've built 4 companies and hundreds of millions of users, and had a lot of fun as an entrepreneur the last 15 years.
Okay, so that you're not going to gloss over that either. So
Exactly.
it's not easy for someone, we always talk about like the golden handcuffs. We always talk about, even with sales, even though I imagine you were probably, had some commission based or whatever, there is a point where when someone jumps from the corporate environment to be, quote unquote, self-employed, that's a big jump. How did you wrap your head around that? Like what prompted that? What made you decide I am going to give up the security of what I've built in this, wherever you were doing sales at the time, to I'm going to jump into the deep end and just do what my mom did, just different.
Yeah. Well, especially coming from where I've come from and finally having what was coveted in, the culture of where I grew up, which is just like the dream job, mid 6 figures, corporate card, fancy, restaurants, flights, all the stuff, I was living the dream. But it wasn't satisfying to me. It just wasn't satisfying. And I was making these companies millions of dollars, and I knew that. And along the way, when I was 27, I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which was, a lot of people have read that book and they're like, yeah, that's some cool stuff. And I've recommended it to a bunch of people. Yeah, I kind of knew that stuff. I'm like, what? That book was like a revelation to me. It was like, I'd never heard some of those ideas before. Like, you can be wealthy if you want to. You can build businesses. What? People do this? How would you even do this? So after I read the book, it actually took me like 5 years of thinking and kind of waiting for the right opportunity. While I was working in the corporate world at Qzzr, then Stryker, I became the guy that if you came into my house or if we went to lunch, there's no way we're talking about anything other than the businesses we could start. I just became obsessed with different ideas. I've got 4 notebooks. I still have them in this closet back here of just that. During that time, I would just keep these notebooks with me and I would just write down different ideas. I'd draw logos. I'd talk about go-to-market plans. I'd create drawings for designs of all kinds of different product ideas. Many of them have now become actual products. And I'm like, yeah, I invented that in my fake notebook here 20 years ago. But that's all I could think about. I was just obsessed and consumed with the idea of becoming an entrepreneur. I knew it was my calling. I knew I had to do it. I knew, and my wife knew it too. And we got to the point where she kind of knew I was going to like almost spontaneously combust into entrepreneur at some point. So she knew it was like inevitable that I'm not going to stay on this corporate career path, even though it was a financially, rewarding path. It just wasn't emotionally rewarding and wasn't what I felt called to do or put on this earth to do. And so I tried starting my first company, Maestro, on the side. I started, but I was, at Stryker, I was I was flying all around. We had 41 different training programs all around the globe, flying all around different cities, multiple cities a week, working 80 hours a week, trying to make that work. To try to start a business on the side, I could get like 2 hours in on Maestro, and it just wasn't enough to get it to go. And I spent a couple of months and I was like, this is going nowhere. And, I told my wife, babe, I think I just need to quit. I think I just need to go a cold turkey and go all in on building Maestro. I'm confident that, I can do it. And so Maestro, the idea was at the time at Stryker, I was trying to build an e-learning program. This is like 2004, 2005. E-learning is starting to become a thing. We're starting to learn online. Bandwidth is finally enough to start to stream videos, and the technology was finally there. And so I was trying to build an e-learning program for Stryker, and I spent 6 months on it, and it was like a full-time job. And I couldn't believe I was working with 5 different vendors, videographers, 3D animators, designers, et cetera, to try to pull all of this together. I thought, this is a joke. There should just be a company that does this, that has all of this talent in-house. We can hand our binders and our CDs and our materials to them, and they can build interactive online training in these modules we need for our reps and our surgeons and our nurses, and we have budget to do it. So I couldn't find that company, and that's why I started Maestro, is I wanted to build the company that I wished existed. And so I did. Actually the week we moved into our dream house on the lake with a nightmare mortgage, I quit my job cold turkey and started Maestro. And that week, I spent 100% of my time working on Maestro, and I downloaded some free software. I built some spine anatomy training modules. I flew to spine implant manufacturers in Texas, a couple medical device companies that I knew, and pitched them. And they had the same problem. They were like, there should just be somebody that does this, that also knows medical, spine anatomy. Holy crap. Like, you're hired. And so I did the first 2 deals, a $30K deal and a $90K deal. And I was in business. But now I needed to fulfill. Now I needed to build all of this stuff, which I hadn't done myself. I was working with all of these vendors. So had to hire, the engineers, had to hire the designers, project managers, and et cetera, to like build a little interactive agency. But that's how Maestro got started. That's how the ball got rolling. And, then we spent all of our time building these things and had to learn to go sell and fulfill, and, all of the challenges of a service-based company like an agency. So it was a fun time, and sort of meant to be in a great way to cut my teeth as an entrepreneur.
This should be a masterclass, man.
I don't know.
Just listening to that journey, because so many people are in this, I'll get my education, I'll go to this job, boom, 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 boom. And just the fear of jumping ship sometimes is, as Gary referred to, the golden handcuffs. And you even said yourself, I was not a good student. If there are those individuals, and I'm gonna take that $1 consultjosh.com thing that you got,
grab it.
If you were to look at your old self, or any other kid that's coming up in college or high school or whatever it might be, what would be some of the things that you would tell them?
I'd, if they want to be an entrepreneur, I think, that's a pretty broad question. So let me try to scope it. I would say, if I were talking to someone who was in my position, who had a corporate job, and they really felt called to do this, that's what I'd first check in on with them, is just like, why do you feel called? What is it? And, why do you feel driven? Are there other ways? Because honestly, if I were to like trace out the trajectory of me staying in the corporate world, the medical device world, and management where I was, I could probably actually financially be better off than I am now. I think, like, some of my friends who stayed on that path, I'd probably be running a division of Stryker or GM of something, and have insane stock and an insane, just like it. So it's not like this is a better financial path. It's just a different path, a different way to butter your bread. And so I'd want to make sure that they really felt called to this. And then secondly, if they were married, I'd want to make sure that their spouse or significant other was 100% on board. This is one thing that I've seen over and over with entrepreneurs, where they feel so dedicated to this, but their spouse isn't there with them. They're just not on the same page. And it ends up like creating this cancer and corroding their relationship, corroding their potential as an entrepreneur. And so, a lot of times I'll advise entrepreneurs to like not move forward, or to sell the company or move on. And unless you can get your spouse on board, which is the other option. And I've been lucky that, I'm grateful that my wife believes in me to a fault. Like, she just believes I can do it. And then probably the third thing I'd say is, and this is what gave me confidence to answer your question, I could go get a job at like any medical device company tomorrow. I could like walk in because of my track record and my sales and my doubling quota and all this cool stuff. I could like work at any company, and really I could just point to a company and they would hire me. So I didn't really feel like there was a downside. I really didn't feel like there was a downside. And I just generally feel like if I'm going to wake up every morning and put my pants on and be, go do something and work really hard at it, I might as well work or be playing with a deck that has a big outcome in it, and that has a, so the deck I'm playing with now, if we're thinking about playing a deck of cards or some, there's an 11-figure outcome in there. There's probably a couple of 10-figure cards. There's several 9-figure cards. There's also a lot of 0 cards in that deck, and if we're flopping cards. So, but if I stay the course at a corporate job, there's not an 11-figure card in that deck. It's probably not a 10-figure card in that deck. There's 9-figure outcomes in that deck. And I think I would be there right now, but I've already achieved some of that. So it depends on what you want to do. And it's not really even about the financial outcome. That almost sounds like I made it about the financial. That matters so little to me. That matters so little to me. Why do I do what I do? Because I can fulfill the measure of my creation, which is to make beautiful things. That's my mission. That's why I'm here. And I can do that by making a jar of pickles. I can rebuild a cool engine. I can make an awesome piece of furniture. I can put a cool event together. But the most beautiful thing I can make is a company that solves a meaningful problem for not just dozens, but hundreds of millions of people, that can create wealth for not just myself, but all other people that are involved in it, from investors to team members, and put a dent in this planet, make the world better. And that's why, I'm doing what I'm doing with Volley. Why it took 4 years between my last company and this one to really think deeply about what I wanted to create and what the world needed and why, because I don't see a future of the world where we don't have a flexible way to communicate face to face. And Volley, the video messaging app, is really solving that problem in a unique way. Right. So I with each company, I get to like make a bigger and bigger dent. And that's the most beautiful thing. And, why I feel called to the work.
Well, I was looking at your Volley app website, and I think it's really cool to see how you come through, your personality and what you're saying now. The reason you do what you do comes through so brightly on your webpage.
Really good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It worked.
Yeah, no, it's true. It doesn't come across as just another corporate app web page saying what they're supposed to say. You know what I mean? Even down to the deuces, the peace sign that you have on the end of one of the sentences. I was like, I want to meet this guy. Like, this sounds really, really cool. But another thing I really appreciate about your story, Josh, is that you I'm sure you read a lot, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm sure you read a bunch of other books, and some books will say, don't jump ship, like do it on the side, or wait until you cover what you're making in the corporate world. In fact, I know someone, and Maurice does too, that he worked at Raytheon and wanted to get into apps, and he built it on the side until he replaced his income, because that worked for his family and worked for his wife. And then he became incredibly successful, after that. But I think it's so important that people don't get locked into this is how you have to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the journey. You know what I mean? And I think you're a prime example of that as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that everyone should quit their job and run after their dream, unless that's really the right situation for you. And I had this unique, set of conditions that made that the right thing for me. The notion of a side hustle is very powerful. In fact, with Volley, we're enabling side hustles right now because you can charge for time limited access to you in a DM, which means you can charge for asynchronous consulting. You can build a product powered by your expertise in minutes with Volley. We just launched this new platform, so we're powering these side hustles. But for me, almost all of my success has been found from picking one thing worth doing and then just doing it with all you got. And that's what's worked for me. But the things I picked doing are pretty big things. And it's not like you could build a Volley and a Qzzr at the same time. There's just no way. In fact, it's really hard to build a Volley, right? To make that work if you give it all you've got and you put your 100% focus on it. And so why would you then be making a side bet on some pickle business or something like that, which is not a side bet. It's really a one day a year thing.
But it sounds to me like probably the secret sauce to your success though is that you go into these, like you said, it's not really just the financial. If you're just chasing a dollar, you're really someone's gonna have a hard time if the passion isn't there behind it. And it sounds like like that's where you're coming from is, okay, I have the passion for this. I can't shut this off. This is what I need to do. This is what excites me. And like you said, helps me put my pants on in the morning. Yeah. So I'm actually a nurse and in the emergency department. And a lot of times I see these new grads come in and inevitably I'll ask them like, hey, what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, I want to do trauma. I want to do trauma 1. And I was like, why? They say, the adrenaline. I want the adrenaline. I'm like, that is the absolute worst reason you could possibly come up with to go into something like that. Because after a while, that adrenaline goes away. So anyway, I really appreciate your message of, what is it that you really are looking for? Because if you're just trying to get rich or chase a dollar and you go into something for that reason, most people I think are going to fail.
Yep. And Josh, one thing that I've appreciated about you, we've only met a couple of times in face to face. And first of all, you offer yourself so willingly. I remember when I was seeing if you would talk to Jake White, for instance, and that was really cool that you connected like that. But the other thing that comes through is something Gary alluded to earlier, but I'll say a different way, is that you're true to you. You don't have to seek the validation of anybody. You just go for it. And it's neat to see, as Gary had already mentioned, that it does come through on the things that you do. And in a sense, people are really drawn to the things that you do because it is something that's unique, that wasn't out there to try to impress as much as to meet an itch that you had. And all of a sudden it translates into meeting that need, but it really started with something that became, and I refer to the word itchy with you. And it's something that is a far cry from a lot of the things that we see nowadays, especially on social media, that we're trying to impress everyone else versus starting from a foundation of this is me, man. So yeah, I appreciate that about everything that I've ever seen you do, and the advice that you have given to many people that I know. So I gotta thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know that that's something I consciously strive to do, but that feels really good to hear. However, I'm a human, and I still like to see who commented on my Facebook post. And, I still like to see the validation of, so-and-so said this on LinkedIn when I saw, interesting. So I'm human still. But yeah, I try to be my dad taught me to be my own man. That's you got to be your own man. And it would drive me crazy whenever we would want him to do something, he would use that as a teaching moment to teach us, Dad, do a donut. This parking lot's covered in snow. Do a donut. And I'd love to, boys, but I can't. I can't. I've got to be my own man. Now that you've asked me to, I can't do a donut. What? Dad, do a donut.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so that stuck with me. Try to make my own waves.
Well,
And I also do donuts when my kids want me to. 'Cause
Yeah. Come on now. You got
I
to.
don't really want them to be their own people, men and women.
So this is going to be on a left field question, but just out of curiosity, where did your mom get her entrepreneurial
great
like
question.
background,
Yeah.
or how did that happen? That just seems so random to me.
Yeah, I don't know, because like her mom didn't work outside of the home, and her dad worked at Chrysler, as a mechanic. And she's just a dreamer. Like that's just who she is. She's at her core, she's a dreamer and is always thinking about the way things could be and seeing the world in, through her own lens, and seeing people as they could potentially be. And and I got that from her. The dreamer, like when I said she would do odd jobs, it just she started cleaning houses. That's what she did. She started cleaning houses, but inevitably her clients would, she would do other things other than clean. She'd fix something, or her dad being a mechanic, she kind of learned to like fix and repair things and be good with her hands. And so her clients would ask her to do, well, can you paint? Oh yeah, I can paint. And so there's kind of like this ability to dream, and then also the ability to believe that you can learn anything that you need to learn. Well, Pam, can you wallpaper? Oh yeah, I can wallpaper. I'll wallpaper these walls. And so she started painting, then she started wallpaper. Oh, we need to take down this sandstone wall. Oh, that I'll do that. I'll get my boys, we'll take down the sandstone wall, and then I'll build a waterfall at my house with it. True story. So we're loading up her little Plymouth Horizon with big sandstone rocks on this little tiny utility trailer, me and my brother, to take back to our house so that she could build a waterfall in her backyard, using a salvaged garden tub, from someone's house, and then putting all these sandstone rocks around it. So she's just a dreamer, and that's what's in me that also causes me to do what you're talking about, is to cast an infectious vision and to like paint the picture of what the world could be if we could assemble the right team to create that potential future. And that's a lot of what Volley is, what Qzzr, what all of these companies were, is like there's something that doesn't exist in the world. We could make it exist, and if we did, the outcome could be great.
That cast and infectious vision just nailed me right between the eyes, man. Holy moly, that's what I want right there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back, maybe just right after your mother put that vision in. There was something that I read on your profile, and that was that your favorite job was Red Lobster. And I loved seeing that it said, what was your position? I work everything.
Everything. Oh yeah.
I want to learn, what were some of the nuggets of wisdom and ethic that you learned from that? Because that's a bold statement. One of your very first jobs, that nailed me, and it made me very curious. What did you learn in there?
Oh, so many things. In fact, I can tell now when I work with someone professionally or hire them, I can tell that they've never had a crappy job. Like Red Lobster, or a restaurant or a service space, any sort of thing. So there are just so many things that you learn, you take for granted. This kind of go along with the job. You've got to put up with hungry people and who are grumpy and who expect, and they're at Red Lobster in my hometown was like the fancy restaurant. So people are like pulling out their like precious coin to spend money on crab legs, and so they expect the world, they expect a 5-star dining experience from Red Lobster, right? And so you learn to like exceed expectations when I was waiting tables and you're working with customers. But what I really enjoyed is working back of the house, prepping food and working in the kitchen, working on the line. And I did it all from doing dishes to baking to bartending to everything. But I really just enjoyed the working on the line, being a line cook, because you learn to be fast, you learn to be efficient with your movements, you learn every little movement of your hand counts for something. And if you're going to cut a baked potato, cut 3. And if you're going to grab a baked potato, grab 2, because there's 2 on this order, right? And if you're going to remember, the fry cook, you want that timed perfectly so that those shrimp come out right after that scampi comes out of the oven, and they both drop in the plate at the same time. And so I really loved the figuring out the efficiency of being my favorite role there was assembler, which wasn't like the expo was like the person who ran the line or the kitchen, which I did, but I really love being the assembler, who was kind of the person that was pulling everything together. And I was able to do it well enough that on the nights that I worked, there's usually 2 of them. They didn't need a second one because I could run both windows and keep all of that straight. And that was a little point of pride for me, and just learning to be efficient with my movements, learning to set things up, learning to plan. And the night would go by like this. It would just like you show up, you put your apron on, and pretty soon you're doing the floors. And I just loved that. And then the camaraderie with all of the young people who are at this stage of life working in a restaurant. It's just kind of a beautiful thing. And then we've got, the convicts who are, they're the ex-convicts who are working in the dish ring, and we're mixing with them, and they show up at the parties after work. And, it's just kind of an interesting little community that comes out of the restaurant. So I loved it. I really loved it. If I could get paid well to do that, I'd probably consider doing that. In fact, after I've sold a couple of my companies, it's always on the list of like, should I go work at Red Lobster again? Would that be kind of fun to pick up some fry shifts? Would the manager think I'm just crazy saying, look, I just want to do 1 fry shift a week. Just put me on Thursday nights. I don't know. It just seems it's romantic. I know every time I talk myself out of it, because I'm like, no, dude, you would hate that. You would not want to spray off those gross floors every night like you did when you were 19 years old and thinking that was okay. Yeah, you'd hate it. So I haven't, but it's always on the list.
You're so right though, that you really can tell those who have or have not worked a crappy job in their life.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, like you said, is just dealing with a crappy job, the things that you learn from that. But I also look back and you alluded to this as well, is you also learn how to deal with people from all walks of life, because you get some interesting people working in crappy jobs.
Yep.
And so you learn how to interact with people that you would never get if you just came straight out of college and jumped into a corporate career or something. But yeah, it's funny you said I've never really been able to put my thumb on it, but I think you just nailed it.
Well, one of the tells is that someone can't accept feedback. If that's one of the tells, if they have a hard time, like if you give feedback about something and they get flustered and they can't hear it, and they have to overcome that feedback or defend themselves, you're like, really? I can't just say like, hey, I don't like that pink or whatever, whatever that is. Like, I've had people yell at me in the middle of a packed, lobby about their, not getting seated on time or whatever. Like they've not had those experiences for way more petty reasons, to create the humility or the lack of pride that they need to be able to accept feedback, those sorts of things. So I don't know. You would think, well, do you then screen for people and what were their early career? I don't, but I probably should, because might be more successful.
No, I appreciate you taking me back to my own memory lane, because I worked at McDonald's, and it was, well, I know too much about hamburgers, man. I know what's going on back there. But the chaos and the two words, chaos and camaraderie, really come to mind, because you do learn so much about, I mean, it was minimum wage, for heck's sake. And it was easily the hardest job I had ever done at that point in my life. But I remember to this day almost every person that I ever worked with, because, and that's over 30 years ago, man. But it did leave an impact, and you're right.
Yep.
You learn to take feedback in every shape or form, and it's usually not nice. but you definitely develop the druthers to take that kind of stuff, man. Thank you. I love how you just summarized that. Perfect. I can see why you like this so much. Oh man. Well, this has been one of those interviews that not only makes me reflect, but makes me want to do better. It really has. And it just like the initial first time we met over there in Alpine. And I wanted to go back better, and I took a lot of the principles that you had taught back then and applied them. And even though it's over a decade, I mean, this part of this is the fruition of this. So I had to get you on the show to thank you publicly.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome, man. So awesome to hear. Yeah. I feel like more people need to, you mentioned offering your time more. When I came up as an entrepreneur, I had such a hard time finding people who could help me, people who were willing to take the time to actually give me feedback, and not work on their own thing for a moment, but help me work on my thing. I just had a hard time finding people who had done what I had done that could actually give me feedback or help me. So for anyone else who's trying to build their dream or become an entrepreneur, I really like it. It feeds me, so it's not selfless, right? Like I really love helping and teaching and giving back, but I also want to unblock someone from where they're at, because entrepreneurship is just a really lonely place, especially the leader, especially the CEO or the founder. It's just a really lonely place to be, because you can't always talk to your investors. You can't always say what you're thinking to your co-founders or your team, because what if you did? What would they think? Right. And I'm not saying that I keep massive secrets or anything, but that voice is in the back of your head, like, ooh, that's pretty high stakes, man. And I've been accused of being radically transparent. So I appreciate you saying that, because that is something I try to actively do, is to help out when I can, or when someone asks.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Well, Garrett, I'm looking at, when I look at you, I know you went through an entrepreneur journey. I mean, what do you think of all this, man?
Oh no, I absolutely love it. And I kind of went from entrepreneurial back into corporate, but I've always had it's actually served me very well having the entrepreneurial side going back into the corporate world, ironically, and it's like you said, there's always, I don't always see myself as fitting the mold, because I go into these situations saying like, okay, I'm wired to fix stuff. I'm wired to figure it out. I've worn every hat under the sun as a business owner, and then there's actually value to that in the corporate world as well, because I don't try and fit the mold. Will I go back to the entrepreneurial world? Yeah, 100% at some point. Once I've done my foray into what I'm doing now, because I absolutely love it. But no, I really do appreciate your perspective, Josh. I think it's first of all, it's just you just have such an uplifting way and a positive way about you. I think it's incredibly inspiring, and you've dropped a lot of just really good golden nuggets on us today.
Yeah.
And so I hope that I want to share this episode with, kind of the entrepreneurial groups and people that are just starting to get going, because man, your words are so profound. I really do appreciate your time.
Sheesh. Oh, guys, stop it.
Gosh,
thank you.
Well, I feel like we've laid you on the couch and we've tried to psychoanalyze.
Over a decade And it still, I think about what you told me back at that meeting, that much up to this point, but also when another entrepreneur has a question, that's why, again, you're top of mind every time. So you got to watch out, man.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I've made all the mistakes, so I've got a lot of scars I can point to, and maybe help someone avoid those. If I can, happy to do it.
That's
Love
awesome. Well, I'll be bugging you in the future, Josh. Just be aware.
Good.
Perfect. Well, Josh, once again, thank you for your time. I know you're a busy guy, but this means a lot, and I know that it will definitely benefit a lot of people. So
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been my pleasure, guys. Always happy to share my story and some insights. Hopefully, if they can help one person, I've done my job.
Thank you.